In 598 AD, there were still 6 years left until Emperor Yang of Sui ascended the throne and proclaimed himself emperor. There are still 18 years left until Li Yuan attacks Chang'an and establishes a new emperor. There are still 28 years left until the Xuanwu Gate Incident. The soul of a girl who came from a different world, the river of history began to flow in another direction. Keywords of the novel. Emperor Taizong of Tang is my older brother without pop-ups. Emperor Taizong of Tang is my older brother. Download the complete TXT collection, and Emperor Taizong of Tang is my older brother's latest chapter for reading. Chapter 1. Reincarnation into the Li family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Reincarnation into the Li family. Emperor Guangxiao, the great saint of literature and martial arts of Emperor Taizong, tabooed the world and the people. He was the second son of Emperor Gaozu, and his mother was named Empress Dou of Taimu Shansheng. After giving birth to Emperor Gaozu, Dou gave birth to a daughter the following year, tabooing Changsheng, and became Emperor Renjun of Tian Hongyun de Cheng. Old Book of Tang. Annals of Emperor Rendi. However, it can be said that in the late Sui dynasty, the 18-root rebellion against kings emerged, opening a magnificent chapter of the turbulent times. From then on, a group of heroes competed for the deer, dragons and snakes mixed together, and the heroes of the world gathered together, engaged in battles, and watched who the flowers fell from. As the saying goes, the hustle and bustle of leisure is like a light cloud, and immortality requires the construction of great honors. In times of crisis, the heroic ant buries her tracks, and brings up the hero to send to you early. In the 19th year of the Kaihuang reign of the Sui and Tang dynasties, which was 599 AD, it was a summer night. In Mingi village, the inner city of Kyoto, where powerful figures gather, a female star falls and a daughter is born at the Tang dynasty mansion. Above the main hall, the head of the family, Li Yuan, heard the good news from the delivery room. The eldest son comforted and prepared to reward the servants. Suddenly, a servant came to report that there was a Taoist priest riding a bull outside the mansion requesting to see him. Li Yuan was secretly puzzled in his heart. The curfew in the city was strict, and he dared not neglect how he got to the deep alleys of the inner city. He ordered his servants to invite him quickly. Not long after, a crane-haired and childlike old man with a fairy-like demeanor swaggered into the hall. Li Yuan was secretly shocked in his heart and quickly stood up to greet him. He bowed and said, "The immortal family is here, but I was unable to meet you from afar. I apologize and forgive you." The old Taoist smiled slightly and waved his hand to brush the dust, saying, "A few days ago, I was observing the celestial phenomena at Longhu Mountain at night. I saw that the female danger star in Zhongzhou had declined and was on the verge of collapse, so I came to the capital specifically. As expected, today I had the opportunity to witness the situation of the Yin and Yang Palace. I am here to congratulate your master on the birth of your son." Li Yuan and his wife Dou had 2 sons earlier, and they were delighted to have another daughter at the beginning of today. At this moment, upon hearing the old Taoist's congratulations, his face relaxed and his heart was overjoyed. He was about to kneel down and return his gratitude. When I heard the 4 words, "having a precious son," I was surprised and asked in response, "Why does the immortal family congratulate me on having a precious son when my wife gave birth to a baby girl?" The Taoist embraced and brushed the dust, observing his nose, mouth, and heart silently without responding. Li Yuan, the Duke of Tang, had been in the officialdom for a long time. He immediately understood and held back the crowd, whispering, "Why not make things convenient? The immortal family is fine." The Taoist stroked his long beard and said, "The woman is in danger. She is the head of fire in the north, and she is in charge of killing and conquering. Now, it is the heat of the summer, and the fire is extremely strong. If she gives birth to a man, it's okay. If she takes time to make achievements and become a high-ranking minister, she will have a very auspicious destiny. Can she give birth to a daughter?" Sigh, she shook her head and said no more. Ah! Upon hearing this, Li Yuan's heart sank and he was about to inquire further. Suddenly, Lady Dou's personal maid rushed in a panic and said, "The master is not doing well." The little girl didn't cough up in one breath, so she closed her breath. Upon hearing this, Li Yuan was so shocked that the teacup in his hand fell to the ground with a loud bang, shattering into pieces. Without time to greet the Taoist priest, he hurriedly rushed towards the backyard. In the delivery room of the backyard, the servants were silently wiping their tears. Dou sat on the bed, holding a thin and weak baby girl in her arms and crying loudly. The stable doctor beside the bed was both shocked and ashamed when she saw Tang Taizong rushing in. Li Yuan took 2 steps closer and shouted, "Madam." Upon hearing her husband's voice, Dou raised her head and tearfully cried, "Master, our child," while handing the baby girl to Li Yuan. Li Yuan trembled and took the kitten-sized baby girl, watching her face turn dark and her eyes tightly closed. With a sniff, my legs softened and I almost fell to the ground. In a daze, Li Yuan remembered the words of the immortal family in the front hall just now. He quickly hugged the baby girl, turned around, and ran towards the outside, shouting, "Help the immortal family." At this moment, the old Taoist had arrived at the courtyard outside the house and waved his hand to Li Yuan, who rushed towards him in 3 steps and 2 steps. He stroked his long beard and looked at the baby girl in swaddling clothes. Li Yuan bowed to the ground in front of the Taoist priest, lifted the child above his head, and shouted, "I beg the immortal family to show mercy and save my child." Before the Taoist could answer, Dou, who had just given birth, disregarded everyone's obstruction and rushed out of the house. Seeing her husband's actions, she stumbled and ran to his side, bowing to the ground and saying, "Please ask the immortal family to save my daughter's life. If the immortal family can save my daughter's life, she will be the great benefactor of my Li family, offering her all the gold and silver wealth. I am an outsider. What's the use of external things like gold and silver? Come closer." The old Taoist waved at Li Yuan and said calmly. Li Yuan quickly took 2 steps forward, and the old Taoist looked at the baby girl in her arms. With a flick of his wrist, he gently brushed the dust on the Baihui acupoint on top of the baby girl's head, while silently reciting the mnemonic in his mouth. Then, with both fingers together, he gently tapped the baby's eyebrows and shouted, "Middle." I heard the baby girl cry loudly, and her pale face gradually regained its rosy hue. At this moment, everyone present was shocked. Some servants had already knocked to the ground and shouted repeatedly, "Thank you very much, old immortal. Thank you very much, old immortal, for saving lives." The nearby medical officer has received the baby girl and confirmed that her health is safe and sound. The old Taoist said indifferently, "Lord Guo, this is a temporary measure. If we only manage it for a while, we cannot manage it for a lifetime. If we leave it unchecked, we will ultimately end up in a bad end." The Duke of Tang, who had just relaxed, tightened his heart again and quickly asked, "Is there a cure?" The old Taoist stroked his beard and said, "It can imitate the stories of the northern and southern dynasties." The Duke of Tang, who had been reading poetry and books since childhood, naturally knew what the old Taoist said about the illusions, but he only hung himself on the southeast branch and was raised by a woman and a man. The old Taoist's words may sound strange at first glance, but judging from his behavior and demeanor, he is undoubtedly an expert from the immortal family. I think it's fate. It's just that this child should have this fate. Li Yuan looked at his wife and sighed, pointing to the baby girl in her arms. From now on, let's call this child Sanlang. Master. Dou Shi suddenly understood her husband's meaning and felt a pang in her heart, with 2 lines of tears flowing down again. Li Yuan waved his big hand and interrupted Madam's words, staring at the people in the yard and shouting sternly, "I have made up my mind about this matter, and I will follow my instructions. In the future, if you talk too much or talk nonsense, you will be dealt with by the family law." The old Taoist then smiled slightly and said, "The decision to kill was decisive, and the Duke of Tang is truly worthy of being the queen of the general's family. In the future, our family will soar to great heights soon. After speaking, he took out a piece of blue sky warm jade from his pocket and stuffed it into the baby girl's swaddle. Under a glance, Li Yuan saw that the precious jade was warm and delicate, as white as fat. He quickly declined, "Taoist, I have already shown great kindness to my family today. How can I still make such a heavy gift? External possessions are nothing to worry about. It's not easy to raise this child, so your fourth son should be called Chang'an. As he spoke, with a flick of dust, the old Taoist had already walked outwards. Li Yuan chased after him with seemingly slow steps, but the distance grew further and further apart. However, in the blink of an eye, people had quietly left the heavily guarded capital city of Daxing. Hundreds of miles away at the top of Mount Song, the old Taoist looked down at the countless stars above his head and sighed lightly. "Chang'an, the chess game has been set up. What will happen in the future depends on your own destiny." In 599 AD, there were still 5 years left until Emperor Yang of Sui ascended the throne and proclaimed himself emperor. There are still 17 years left until Li Yuan attacks Chang'an and establishes a new emperor. There are 27 years left until the Xuanwu Gate Incident. The soul of a girl from a different world, the river of history begins to flow in another direction. Newcomers seeking attention, welcome everyone to provide valuable feedback. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Brothers, friends, and sisters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 3. Underlap Joy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 4. Entering the Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Entering the palace in the evening, while eating, Li Yuan's gaze intentionally or unintentionally fell on Chang'an. Feeling his father's abnormality, Chang'an raised his head and said, "Daddy, do you have anything to say to the child?" Li Yuan's hand holding the vegetables paused for a moment and said, "In the morning, after Xuanwu entered the palace, a decree came from the palace announcing that you will enter the palace tomorrow to meet." The bamboo chopsticks in Chang'an's hand clicked and fell onto the table. He pointed to himself and widened his eyes, asking, "Your Majesty, you want to see me?" "It's not the emperor, it's the empress." "Oh, that's okay." Chang'an picked up chopsticks, and the maid next to her took them and wiped them clean before handing them back. "Why does the empress want to see me?" The empress ate your Hu Bing and said, "What does your nephew and grandson look like after grinding wheat 8 times? Li Yuan laughed as she spoke. Upon hearing this, Dou Shi beside him quickly got up and knelt down, saying, "The child is spreading out, causing a stir. It's my lack of discipline." His voice carried a hint of fear. Chang'an looked at his mother's exaggerated reaction and thought to himself, "No, it's just a joke." Sure enough, Li Yuan's face showed displeasure as he slammed his chopsticks onto the table. "What are you doing? The empress is just joking and teasing, and you're so nervous that you're not as nervous as a 3-year-old child. How can I rest assured that Chang'an will come with you into the palace tomorrow like this? But after all, it's wheat that has been ground 8 times. Dou whispered. "You are both mothers and have children, so you should understand the feelings of being a mother. However, being greedy for a few Hu cakes is not a big sin. To say a disrespectful word, the heavenly family's luxurious clothing and food, although not extravagant, far surpassed that of officials and the common people. Besides, Empress Dugu is at least my aunt, the eldest aunt. Although she hasn't been around much recently, she has taken care of us in the past. This time is mostly to find a reason, just want to see the children, you don't have to worry too much." His tone gradually calmed down as he spoke. Seeing his usually cautious father speak disrespectful words for his own sake, Sheng also looked admiring. "Father, you are indeed showing your dominance." Dou Shi slowly stood up and wiped the corners of her eyes. I feel relieved to hear my husband say so about my body. It's all because I'm stupid. After speaking, he turned to Chang'an and pointed to her head. It's also because you're so restless and have caused so much trouble for me all day long. Alright, let's all eat. Chang'an stuck out his tongue and quickly buried his head in the rice bowl. After dinner, Chang'an followed his father to the study. Li Yuan listened to her recitation of her daytime homework and said, Guan Guan Jujiu, on the island of the river, a graceful lady, a gentleman's good match. Not bad, not seen in 2 days. I've learned this one too. Li Yuan touched Chang'an's head with satisfaction. Daddy, tell the child about entering the palace tomorrow, Chang'an said as he looked at Li Yuan. Li Yuan looked at his daughter carved with powder and jade in his arms, and sighed in his heart. Can this child be prophetic? Worried that she would be afraid of entering the palace for the first time, she comforted her softly and said, Don't worry, Empress Dugu is your aunt and grandmother. She used to have a good personal relationship with my mother, so I'm sure she won't make things difficult for you. Dad, I'm not afraid of the Queen's grandmother making things difficult for me. With my mother by my side, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just worried about breaking the rules and losing our face. Why don't you tell me about the royal etiquette? Chang'an explained. Li Yuan couldn't help but laugh and cry. He was delighted that at this young age, he had considered things so deeply and was truly extraordinary. Crying at a young age, I thought about learning etiquette after only a few days of studying. Do you know that the word etiquette can be big or small in this dynasty? When I was young, it was nothing more than walking, sitting, and sleeping, and speaking according to various rules. When I grew up, it was related to the foundation of the country and the rise and fall of the dynasty. Since the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, in just a few decades, many people have died in the underworld due to the word ritual. Today, you are not old enough to learn etiquette. You are truly a newborn calf and not afraid of tigers. Thinking so in my heart, I comforted him by saying, My father knows that you are talented and thoughtful for your family, but you cannot be too greedy and rash in your academic pursuits. You must first understand words and arithmetic, then the chapters, filial piety classic, and analects. Only after entering school can you learn the 5 classics, and studying the rites in the 5 classics, can truly learn etiquette. My father has been an official for more than 20 years, and he dare not call himself a Zhili. How dare he teach you this without authorization? Seeing his father's refusal without hesitation, Chang'an didn't take it to heart and said, Okay, if I'm blamed by the Empress, don't blame me, Dad. Upon hearing this, Li Yuan laughed heartily, picked her up and kissed her. He placed her on the ground and patted her buttocks, saying, Go back to your house early to rest. Let's go together tomorrow and relax. You can do whatever your mother does after entering the palace. Chang'an nodded and his little butt twisted as he walked away. Li Yuan looked at her departing figure and sighed, There is a child prodigy at home, which is headache-inducing. Li Yuan never expected that after Chang'an entered the palace, even greater headaches would come seeking a monthly pass with 3 copies kowtow. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Entering the Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Entering the palace. The next day, Mao Shi woke up just after his long life. Several unlit oil lamps outside the bedroom cast swaying shadows on the paper window. Chang'an looked at them, imagining the towering palace walls of the imperial palace. Chang'an, you're awake. Do sat up and began to dress with a caress. Mother is also awake. Unable to sleep soundly, are you dressing yourself? Do you want someone to help you? Do put on his clothes and began to gather a head of green silk. I'll do it myself, Mother. I want to wear that outfit. After speaking, Chang'an also sat up, neatly dressed in deep clothes, and with the help of a maid, finished washing up. The mother here has placed the clothes for entering the palace on the couch. The upper body is a navy blue short robe woven from the makeup flower luo in the cloud brocade, and the lower body is white silk pants embroidered with suzhou embroidery, paired with a pair of calf leather boots. After putting on her clothes, the maid Shui'er looked at the young man in the bronze mirror and exclaimed, "Fortunately, the third young master doesn't like going out on weekdays. If he dresses up like this and goes out, I don't know how many young ladies from the government will be enchanted." "That's right, this is a mesmerizing thing that doesn't pay off." Dou Shi also joked on the side. After hearing this, Chang'an pretended to be angry and reached out to scratch Shui'er's itchy flesh. The two of them chased after each other in the room, laughing incessantly. The two of them had enough trouble and reorganized their makeup. After Li Yuan finished tidying up, the family left the door, got on the carriage, and took advantage of the starlight to head towards the direction of Tai Chi Palace. Upon arriving at the Tai Chi Palace, the mother led Chang'an into the side door led by the palace attendants and all the way to the back hall. As soon as he entered the main hall of the harem, Chang'an imitated his mother and knelt down straight without looking at her face. He bowed and sang, "My concubine Dou Shi, my son Chang'an, I kowtow to the Empress Qiansui, Qiansui, Qiansui." A gentle yet dignified voice said, "Flatten." "Madam Xie." Dugu held a tea bowl and looked at Chang'an carefully. His cherry lips lifted lightly and he said, "My niece and daughter. Law, is this Sanlang who has milled the wheat 8 times? Raise your head and let this palace take a look." Chang'an quickly stood up straight and raised his small face to look at the person sitting on the seat. I saw a dignified woman wearing a red embroidered soft robe, leaning on the armrest. When speaking, the gilded golden steps above her head swayed motionless as 100 birds turned towards the phoenix. Under her eyebrows, her eyes were as black as ink and bright as stars, smiling and looking at her. "Empress, please forgive me. It's just that I saw my parents working hard and wanted to show some filial piety, not intentionally wasting food. What I didn't want after grinding it down ended up in my second brother's stomach. I hope Empress can forgive me." Chang'an put aside his thoughts and confessed first. Dugu Huang didn't see any expression behind him and turned to ask Dou Shi, "I heard before that you gave birth to a daughter and even promised a young boy from Chui Shilang's family. Why?" Dou quickly stood up and said, "There's such a thing going on. The reason behind this is, the reason." He glanced around with his eyes. Dugu smiled and said, "Don't worry, these are all close attendants of our palace, they are very reliable." "Yes, it's like this." Dou Shi recounted the causes of this matter in its entirety. "Oh, I see. You sit down, everyone is from your own family, there's no need to be so reserved." The Empress waved her hand. After the two of them sat down, Dugu said, "I should have gone to visit you early in the palace, but since my sister passed away, my body has been feeling unwell. In addition, in recent years, the situation in the previous dynasty was unstable, and your family has had such a bad situation. If I go, it will inevitably cause criticism. It will be too late." "Empress is far-sighted and thoughtful in everything," Dou Shi quickly said. "Fortunately, my nephew has been doing a good job in recent years, and you have also taken care of these children very well at home. Empress Dowager praised me falsely. It's these sensible children, especially this third one, who is intelligent and eager to learn. She can read at just over a year old, and now she can recite the Book of Songs quite well." Dou Shi said of her own child, her eyes almost squinting with laughter. "Oh, really?" Dugu looked at Chang'an again. "It seems that not only did he inherit your father's appearance, but he also had much better talent and knowledge than him. It's rare, sigh. My grandson would be half as obedient as you." Before Dugu could finish speaking, he heard a voice coming from outside the door, "Are you talking about me, grandmother?" A young boy stormed in, sweating profusely and ran to Dugu, grabbing the teacup on the table and pouring a few sips. "Look, you know you're just running around outside all day, so you're not someone who's eager to learn." Dugu fiercely tapped the boy's forehead. Is this Zhao heir? She looked so sturdy. Dou Shi pointed at the boy and smiled. Yes, the crown prince's child is almost 6 years old this year. With all his strength, he can't even fit half a page of books in his head. He wakes up every day to eat and play, and has invited countless gentlemen, which has made him angry. Empress Dugu felt a headache when she mentioned this. Chang'an secretly glanced at the boy in front of him and was startled. Dark skin, sturdy arms, and vigorous hair. My mom, this is a reincarnation of a black bear. Being able to eat and play reminded her of second brother Rui. No wonder Empress Dugu is worried about her temperament. Just as he was thinking about it, he saw little black bear pointing at him and asking, "Grandmother, who is this?" "Zhao heir, this is your cousin from the outer room, named Chang'an," Dugu explained. "Cousin? Chang'an. Can he play with me?" Little black bear looked at Dugu with a hopeful expression on his face. There were very few peers in the palace, and only eunuchs and palace maids would play with him on weekdays. Now that he saw someone of similar age, the little one seemed to have found a playmate and was extremely happy. Dugu looked at Dou Shi and nodded as he saw the latter's willingness on his face. Of course, but it's his first time entering the palace today. You need to take care of him. Don't worry, grandmother. Let's go. I'll take you to see something fun. Seeing Empress Dugu agree, this kid immediately grabbed Chang'an and rushed out. I'll go. Chang'an felt like he was being pulled by a wild horse that had run free, stumbling underfoot and almost getting a dog to eat shit. The dragged Chang'an turned around and looked at his mother in despair, only to see the encouragement and joy in Dou's eyes. Is this selling children for glory? Today I have seen it. Forget it, destroy it. The eternal life that gave up struggling was dragged on like this, running through palace gates, bypassing rockeries one after another, and finally stopping in front of a grand hall. Chang'an supported his knee, gasping for breath. Let's take a break, really. I can't run anymore. No need to run, we're here. Yang Zhao pointed to the front door. Chang'an looked up at the plaque above with the 4 big characters, Zhengda Guangming. In my heart, I shouted, sleeping trough, are you serious? Seeking a monthly pass with 3 copies Kowtow, end of this chapter. Chapter 6. Facing the Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Facing the Court. Emperor Ren had extraordinary talents when he was young. At the age of 3, he read the Book of Songs, and at the age of 5, he was proficient in poetry and literature. He was met by feudal lords from other dynasties and used poetry as a topic to examine officials, but no one could answer. Upon hearing this, Emperor Ren casually brought it to him, intimidating foreign envoys and shocking the court and the public. Old Book of Tang. Volume 3. Renzong Benji. The little black bear looked surprised at Chang'an, thinking that he didn't know where this place was. He enthusiastically explained, don't be afraid, this is the place where the imperial grandfather went to meet the high-ranking officials. That's not it, the Hall of Supreme Harmony that is upright and bright. Chang'an asked cautiously, what are we doing here? The little guy excitedly said, I heard that some foreigners came here to kowtow today. Don't you want to see them? Last time, there were a few black charcoal-like creatures and they performed many tricks. It's really interesting. By the way, my name is Yang Zhao, and they all call me Zhaoer. What's your name? My name is Chang'an. Sigh, please be slow. Yang Zhao grabbed Chang'an and dragged her into the main hall. I thought I was about to face the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty, but I found out it was the back door. To enter the main hall, one needs to bypass a large screen. 2 people were about to break in, and an old eunuch ran out of nowhere. When they saw them, they quickly waved their hands and said, Oh hey, your highness, my lord, why did you come here again? Zhu Gonggang, I'm going in to find my grandfather. He said with a heavy head as he was about to burst in. The father.in.law quickly reached out his hand to stop him and said, "It's not possible today. The envoy from outside the country of Japan is attending, and the emperor is currently angry." "Where?" "Wagua. Wagua has also become a fairy." Emperor Zhao was excited when he heard the novel thing. "Oh, please spare the old slave. The emperor is in a rage. If you go in, not only will the old slave want to eat a board, which will displease the emperor, but you will also be punished and imprisoned," Zhu Gongong advised with a bitter face. Upon hearing the word, confinement, Yang Zhao touched his muscle memory and instantly calmed down. Kuren stayed in place again, didn't want to leave, his eyes twitched, and he came up with a plan. "We won't go in, just take a sneak peek from behind. We promise not to cause any trouble." Zhu Gongong knew about this young master's temperament, and if he didn't take a glance at him, he might not give up easily. He could only helplessly say, "All right, you guys follow me, don't make a sound. Just take a look and you'll come out." Emperor Zhao immediately became happy and took Changqing's hand, coming to the side of the screen and looking out through the gap. Just as he saw Emperor Yuan of Sui drop a memorial to the ground, he angrily cursed, "Lu Aiqing, in the future, you should take a look at these barbarian national documents and then present them to me." "What nonsense are you talking about?" A person hurriedly ran out of the civil service team, who was exactly what the emperor called Lu Aiqing in the minister of Honglu Temple, Lu Ming. Lu Ming was shocked and said, "Your Majesty, there is such disrespectful language in the official documents of the Japanese state. I did not notice it beforehand, and I am guilty." After saying this, he knelt down and apologized. The left minister Gao Ying, who was standing beside him, took a look at the official document and frowned. "Your Majesty, this country of Japan has always been a small country and has always been subject to our country. Now, in this official document, I dare to call myself the country of sunrise, and call myself the country of sunset. It is clear that there is no distinction between priority and importance, and this is a great disrespect." On the dragon chair, Emperor Yuan of Sui asked the Japanese envoy, "Foreign envoy, what is the purpose of your country's emperor writing this letter to me? Respected Emperor Sui of the Great Sui dynasty, the holy and virtuous crown prince of our country is not disrespectful to you. It is just that our country is located in the east, and your country is located in the west. Of course, the sun rises from us and sets from your side. This is a natural principle, not a false statement. I hope your Majesty can make a clear decision." As soon as the person spoke, Changqing saw that there was still a dwarf-shaped figure kneeling below the stage. This person's attire and accent are no different from those of Han people, but their physique is really short, and they kneel there to reach the knees of Gao Shangshu. "Humph, eloquent and eloquent. Even if you are a small country with bullets, dare you call yourself the sunrise country or the emperor? You are truly arrogant and contemptuous." Lu Ming, who was originally lying on the ground, stood up and cursed. The Japanese envoy didn't take it seriously and proudly exclaimed, "The holy virtuous sun is the 31st generation descendant of the sun goddess, possessing supreme wisdom. Under his wise leadership, our country's strength has flourished day by day, and now it has far surpassed neighboring countries, which is incomparable." Crown Prince Yang Guang stood out with his fists clenched in his arms and said in a loud voice, "Even a small country with bullets dares to speak out recklessly. Are you going to rebel? Father, give me 3,000 elite soldiers, and I promise you that I will bring back the noble virtue of that labor in less than 3 months. I'll kowtow and admit my mistake." Humph, what kind of great country's demeanor is it to bully the small with the big? Does the heavenly kingdom, which claims to be a country of etiquette, act in this way? The Japanese envoy refused to back down and met Yang Guang's 4 eyes. "You." Yang Guang was provoked by his words and couldn't speak for a moment. "This little devil has some courage," Changqing praised in his heart. Emperor Yuan of Sui pondered for a moment and said, "Our country has always loved peace, so naturally we will not act recklessly. However, since ancient times, rulers and subjects have been subordinate, and we must distinguish who is in charge and who is in charge. The Japanese envoy just stood up and saluted. The priority also depends on one's abilities. The holy virtuous emperor has been reading poetry and books since childhood. I heard that contemporary poetry and songs originated from China. Recently, I had a feeling and came up with a question to consult with all the adults. There was silence in the main hall, followed by a burst of laughter. What you said is nothing else. Poetry, books, songs, and prose are things passed down from our ancestors. Chinese people say second, but no one dares to say first. Moreover, most of the civil servants in the court make a living from this, and those who have been studying it for most of their lives. Isn't this a case of using eggs to strike stones and seeking their own death? Lu Ming was the first to volunteer. He was skilled in poetry, songs, and prose. At this moment, he was eager to make contributions and hurriedly said, "What question?" "You can tell me." The Japanese envoy smiled and said, "Lord Lu, don't worry yet. This question is absolute for eternity, and I bet none of you here can answer it." Lu Ming. Vertical son, you really know how to boast about grandeur. If you think of a pair, you dare to falsely claim absolute. The Japanese envoy made progress and said, "Words are baseless. Do you dare to make a bet with me, gentlemen?" Lu Ming. What kind of gambling? The Japanese envoy said, "If anyone can answer this question in the court, then our country will pay tribute year after year and be a vassal year after year. If we cannot answer it, then from now on, our country will cease all annual tribute to your country." Hiss, this statement was uttered, revealing a desperate situation. Originally, the intention of the drunken man was not to drink. Now, all the civil and military officials have taken it seriously, betting on hundreds of thousands of annual coins. If a boat capsizes in the sewer, it will be a criminal for eternity. Everyone understands the powerful relationship here, and for a moment, the officials who were originally eager to try retreated. Just as everyone was about to handle this matter coldly, Emperor Yuan of Sui's old habit of saving face broke out again. With full confidence, he said, "Poetry, songs, and prose, with small skills like carving insects, you can come up with a topic. The previous text has been repeatedly revised. If there are any inconsistencies or illogical points, please feel free to point them out. Additionally, please ask for monthly tickets and recommendations." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Confrontation of the Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Confrontation of the Court. Behind the screen, Chang'an was surprised to see that the emperor casually agreed to the other party's request. The emperor either had absolute confidence or really didn't take it seriously. Suddenly, someone tugged at their sleeve and turned their head to see that it was Yang Zhao. He whispered, "You were arguing so much just now, why haven't you been arguing again?" "They want to write a match with us," Li Yuan replied. "Ah, writing a couplet. I thought we were going to do some magic, that's really boring." The emperor's head started to ache as soon as he heard writing a couplet and suggested, "Why don't we go?" At this moment, Chang'an said calmly and comforted him, "Good cousin, don't worry, fun is about to start." They spoke in a loud voice, and Duke Zhu made a gesture of silence, forcing Emperor Sun to pout and remain silent. In the main hall, the Japanese envoy saw that Emperor Yuan of Sui had been tricked and felt secretly pleased. He stood up and quickly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my question is very simple. Please write a couplet, and the two couplets should add up to 100 ancient names. If it is correct, our country will pay tribute year by year and be called a minister year by year. If it is not correct. If it's right or not, don't even make noise." Crown Prince Yang Guang pushed him aside and saluted, "Father, don't pay attention to this clown jumping over the beam. My son still suggests sending troops to conquer." Before he could finish speaking, Emperor Yuan of Sui waved his hand and interrupted him, saying, "My eloquence and eloquence are beyond words. Do you have any idea when you think about this topic, dear ministers? As soon as these words were spoken, the group of officials below remained silent. In the 2,000-year history, there were no less than 100 people with names and surnames, but they had to be concentrated in a pair of couplets, and the couplets had to be neat and rhymed, which was hard to imagine for a while. Suddenly, Lu Ming raised his hand and said, "Your Majesty, I thought of a couplet. Confucius, Mencius, Han Fizi, Mozi. Mozi. Well, it seems inappropriate to have grown a bit longer. Let Wei Chen think again, think again." As he spoke, he felt something was wrong and his face turned red as he retreated. There is more to success than failure. Emperor Wen of Sui also felt a little uneasy in his heart. Everyone loves me. I usually enjoy drinking alcohol and writing poetry, and the wind, flowers, snow, and moon. Why do we need to speak now? Everyone loves me silently. The emperor was furious, and the officials below couldn't keep silent any longer. They all offered their own matches. Zhao Zilong rode alone to save the Lord. Guan Yunchang was loyal and brave for eternity. Zhang Yida bravely crowned the three armies, and Huang Han raised his arrow to point to the sky. This is the general statement. In the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, 100 schools of thought were contending. With millions of people at the top and bottom, the hearts of all were united. In the Yuan dynasty, the moon was not seen, but a few lamps were lit to give color to Confucius and Mencius. When the insects were startled and thunder was not heard, a few drums were struck to proclaim the power of Sun Wu. These were the words of the literati. Everyone said a lot, but either the confrontation was not neat or did not meet the requirements. Emperor Wen of Sui was not satisfied with what he heard, and not only became more and more impatient, but also said to himself, "Is this little Japanese slave really causing trouble for our kingdom, which is vast and magnificent?" At the moment, he used a strategy to slow down his troops and said, "Dear officials, there are many affairs today, and it's not too early at this moment. I'm tired, so why don't we stop here for now? Let's wait for the officials to return home and slowly consider for a night, and come back tomorrow morning to reply to the Japanese envoy. How about that?" Everyone was overjoyed. "That's right. Let's go back today and find a few literary figures tonight to hold candles and chat together. If we don't believe it, we can't come up with a good couplet." The emperor's delaying strategy, although there is a suspicion of playing tricks, is much better than being stuck here without realizing it. Changsheng's mind is not good. The emperor just said this when the other party proposed a gambling agreement. Now that he has accepted the challenge and found reasons to delay, the other party will definitely not be willing to give up. Sure enough, the Japanese envoy became displeased upon hearing this and said, after discussing for so long, "Haven't anyone been able to answer? I think it's just a group of scoundrels with superficial appearances. What a kingdom of heaven and etiquette, but that's it. Such a country is not worthy of our loyalty. You." The faces and ears of the crowd were flushed, but unfortunately, they couldn't come up with an answer and could only be in a hurry somewhere. Emperor Wen of Sui also felt a bit regretful at this moment, thinking to himself, "Perhaps it was my recklessness. This is indeed an absolute thing that will last forever. So many people can't think of it. What should we do?" I saw the Japanese envoy proud, like a jumping clown, about to continue speaking when suddenly a childish voice came from behind the dragon chair. "You fart." A small black whirlwind rushed out next to the screen behind the dragon chair and ran closer, spitting at him with a "bah" on his face. The Japanese envoy was fooled by this child and froze in place for a moment. "Zhao Heir, why did you come here?" Prince Yang Guang exclaimed in a low voice beside him. All civil and military officials recognized this young master as Yang Zhao, the eldest son of the crown prince. When he spat at the Japanese envoy, he was secretly amused. As soon as Yang Guang finished asking, he saw Yang Zhao's face beaming with joy as he shouted at him, "Father, if he solves this problem, I will The words shocked the whole room. Yang Guang was also taken aback, thinking that he was jokingly talking nonsense. He immediately shouted, "Shut up, you're young, don't talk nonsense. Get out of here quickly." He was about to pull him. Unexpectedly, Yang Zhao was small and powerful, but when he pulled him down, he couldn't stop him. In a hurry, Yang Zhao came up with a clever idea and ran to Yang Jian, kneeling down and shouting, "Grandfather, Zhao Heir didn't deceive anyone. I really know how to do it." Oh. Yang Jian looked at this kid's expression, which was different from when he usually played. It seemed a bit real, still hesitating, and he saw that his little devil had already woken up. With a splash of saliva on his face, he said shyly and indignantly, "Is this the way we treat guests, the royal son? Hey, you little dwarf, if you have something to say, tell me your question again." Yang Zhao supported Yang Jian's knee, feeling confident in his heart. Your Highness is not a minister of civil and military affairs. Have you kept your word? Hey, there's a difference in your statement. Just now, you were clearly referring to someone from the main hall, and you didn't necessarily demand that they be civil and military officials. Your Highness was also from the main hall just now, so naturally he is qualified, argued left Shangshu Gaoying. After listening to him say this, the Japanese envoy was momentarily speechless. After thinking for a while, he finally said, "Okay, even if you are qualified, Your Highness. If you can really answer, I will give you 3 Kowtow heads. From now on, our country will pay tribute every year, declare allegiance every year, and always serve the Great Sui as the main deity. If I can't answer, I'll kowtow 3 times to you. I'll also pay tribute to you year after year and bow to you year after year." Yang Zhao's temper also rose. As soon as these words were spoken, the Japanese slaves were overjoyed. Originally, this time it was just a test, but they didn't expect it to really be successful. Judging from his young age, he may not even recognize a few big characters. It's simply wishful thinking to accurately recognize this. The days of personal promotion and wealth are right in front of me. The Japanese slave understood his joints and nodded in agreement, then listened to the question. "There should be 100 ancient names in the 2 couplets, you say it." Yang Zhao clapped his hands happily as he saw the other party agree and said, Okay, little dwarf, listen carefully. The first couplet is 28 Generals of Yuntai. Sigh. As soon as this couplet was released, everyone was shocked and exclaimed, 28 generals from Yuntai, it's amazing. The 28 generals of Yuntai were 28 great generals under the command of Emperor Xuanwu of Han, Lu Xiu, who helped him unify the world and revitalized the Han dynasty. They were all famous figures in history. This couplet is short and concise, hitting the theme perfectly, excellent. Everyone also looked at the Crown Prince Yang Guang in admiration. Unexpectedly, the young prince had a bad reputation, but it turned out that he was hiding it. The Crown Prince's guidance was very effective. Yang Guang also wondered how much his child weighed. He knew the most about it, not to mention the couplets. When asked to write, he could run away. Several father and son mentioned him shaking their heads and sucking their teeth and flowers. Why did you have an opening today? This Japanese slave was also a Chinese expert who was familiar with poetry and books. When he heard the couplet, his heart was half cold. His face turned pale as he stared at Yang Zhao, and a cold sweat broke out from his head. After Yang Zhao finished speaking about the first couplet, he got stuck in the second couplet and kept repeating, "The second couplet is, the second couplet is." It turned out that he didn't usually read books. Now, when he was excited, he forgot the following sentence. As he spoke, his gaze turned to the screen behind him. These can definitely be found on Baidu, and those who are interested can search and see for themselves. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Opposition to the Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Opposition to the Court. Chongqing saw him chattering for a long time, knowing that he had forgotten something clean, so he had to extend half of his head and whispered a reminder, 72 wise men of Confucius. Who's behind, come out. Yang Jian heard the sound and whispered. Duke Xu saw that the emperor was angry and knew he had violated the emperor's taboo. He was so frightened that he quickly pulled Chang'an out and explained, this child came with the crown prince and has always been behind the screen. Li Yuan, one of the generals in the audience, suddenly exclaimed in surprise, Chang'an. Yang Jian saw Li Yuan speak out and immediately asked, why does Li Aiqing know this person? Emperor, please forgive me. This person is the third son of Weichen, and I will call him Chang'an. Li Yuan knelt down with a clasped fist and reported. The emperor looked at him and thought to himself, why are you all bringing your children to court? He stroked his beard and said, oh, so he is your third son. I have heard of him. What did you say later? Chang'an knelt down and saluted, to inform the emperor, the crown prince has come up with an absolute plan for the Japanese envoy. The first couplet is the 28 generals of Yuntai, and the second couplet is the 72 sages of Chang'an. Yang Zhao exclaimed happily upon hearing this, yes, I remember, that's it. The whole scene didn't calm down with a loud bang. All the officials are discussing with various tongues. Yuntai to Chang'an, 20.8 to 70.2, neat and beautiful, yes, beautiful. At such a young age, being able to stand up so absolutely, Your Highness is extremely talented. Now let's see what the Japanese dwarf has to say, The Japanese envoy also looked dejected. This pair is even better than what the holy virtuous emperor thought. If they insist on denying it, it would be self-deprecating. Unexpectedly, I didn't expect that even the civil and military officials in the court couldn't come up with the idea of falling into the hands of a little doll. Yang Guang was also shocked for a long time and couldn't calm down. Did he really take a wrong look? In fact, his son descended to the mortal world as a Wensu star, but he has been hiding it all along. The emperor, without rubbing the sand in his eyes, looked at Yang Zhao and asked in a low voice, honestly tell me, who came up with these pairs? Yes. Yang Zhaowang looked at his cousin Chang'an and saw him shake his head slightly, then he didn't say a word. But this was clearly seen in the eyes of Emperor Yang of Sui, and he immediately questioned again, finally understanding the ins and outs of the matter. Originally, when Chang'an heard the question posed by the Japanese just now, he burst into laughter. This little Japan is also too funny. With the things on the streets that will be rotten for 1,000 years, I also want to compare myself to the heavenly kingdom. If I don't teach you a lesson today, you will truly be worthy of being a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. Chang'an made up his mind and leaned in Yang Zhao's ear, telling him the answer. He agreed that if everyone couldn't answer, Yang Zhao would go out. Yang Zhao likes to do this kind of high-profile thing the most. When he sees adults catching him blind, he doesn't care if he remembers it or not, so he rushes out. As a result, I accidentally forgot my words and the mastermind behind the scenes also surfaced. Kid, are these 20.8 generals from Yuntai and 70.2 wise men from Chang'an really what you came up with? The Japanese envoy still didn't believe it and looked at Chang'an with red eyes. Chang'an stood up and straightened his chest when he saw that the other party was not giving up. He said in a milky voice, the couplets are just some subtle tricks. I can answer them from an old man in my 70s or 80s to a child in my 30s or 40s. What's the difficulty? Okay, good. It's not a small matter if you're not too angry. The Japanese envoy was quite angry. Do you dare me to test you again? How do you want to take the exam? Just for the couplet, I say upper couplet, you take the lower couplet. As soon as this sentence was spoken, the hearts of civil and military officials tightened again. After all, they were young, and answering the difficult questions ended without hurting their face. Why do we need to grow branches beyond the boundaries? If you can't answer later, isn't it a waste of previous efforts? Regardless of the thoughts of civil and military officials, Chang'an wanted to teach this Japanese devilish a lesson at this moment. He raised his head with a small hand and said, "All right, you can just set the question." The first line is midnight, 2:30. The second line is Mid-Autumn Festival in August. In the first couplet, I say, the warblers sing in the north, and in the Yen language, it borders the south. In the following couplet, I say, blessings never come in pairs, misfortunes never come alone. I'll add a few more words to the couplet just now. The warblers cry in the north, autumn has only just left, and in the Yen language, spring is approaching in the south. What you wrote in the upper couplet is average, but in the lower couplet, I replied. Blessings come in pairs today, misfortune never comes alone yesterday. You. Good and good. Listen to my couplet. The moon in the sky is full, the moon in the human world is half full, the moon is full and meets the moon in half. You say the second couplet. My response to the following couplet. At the end of this year, at the beginning of the following year, at the end of each year. I said, in the two apes cutting wooden mountain, even this monkey can cut saws. Ha ha ha, kid, are you still right? The Japanese slave's eyes were red and his voice was hoarse, showing a state of madness. Chang'an heard the sarcasm implied in the other person's question, pondered for a moment, and calmly replied, a horse is trapped in the mud, how can this birth have hooves? You. The Japanese envoy's anger filled his heart and he didn't catch a breath. His eyes rolled and he passed out. Chang'an saw him dizzy with anger and cursed inwardly, deserved it. I am a great Chinese nation, how can you wait for clowns to bully me? On his face, he remained calm and turned around to bow deeply to Yang Jian, saying, I'm lucky I didn't live up to my fate. Okay. Yang Jian's face lit up with joy and he praised repeatedly, Duke of Tang is truly the pillar of the country. He raised a good son, great. Come on, reward Li Chang'an with 300 taels of silver. 300 taels. My mom, I only got so many rewards after a few words, and the money is too easy to earn. Chang'an was a bit confused, and behind him Li Yuan whispered, what are you doing in a daze? Thank you quickly. The emperor was satisfied when he saw that Chang'an was sturdy and knocked his head a few times. Glancing at the Japanese envoy who was still unconscious on the ground, his evil spirit dissipated. He stood up and waved his sleeve, step back. Chang'an lay on the ground and didn't dare to get up. He slowly lifted his head when he saw a pair of exquisite cowhide boots standing in front of him. As soon as I looked up, I saw a handsome and fair face. Yang Zhao's father, His Highness the Crown Prince. I saw Yang Guang gently lift it and Chang'an stood up. As Chang'an was about to bow, Yang Guang waved his hand to indicate not to use it. He patted the dust on his legs and smiled, asking, are you Chang'an, the third prince of my cousin? Chang'an was unaware of the relationship between the crown prince and his father, as well as the specific names of the people in front of him. He could only answer, my nephew is Chang'an. Not bad, not only does it give birth to outstanding talents, but it also has excellent knowledge. My child is dull, so I need to teach him more in the future. If there's anything wrong with your highness the crown prince, my cousin has a pure and kind temperament, lively and lovely, and I feel inferior to him. Chang'an bowed to the ground. The crown prince was about to say more when he heard Li Yuan say, what are you still doing here? The wind hasn't been enough yet. Your mother has been cold for a long time, she should be worried about you. After Li Yuan finished speaking, his expression became solemn and he bowed deeply to His Highness the Crown Prince. Your Highness, I will retire first. He glanced at Chang'an and then turned around and strode out of the hall. The Crown Prince waved his hand as a gesture of return, looked at Li Yuan's back, smiled and remained silent. Yang Zhao was afraid of his father and stood on the side, afraid to speak out. At this moment, seeing my father looking at me, he whispered, Father, my cousin and I can leave now. Yang Guang smiled and said, "You performed well today. Let's take Chang'an back." Yang Zhao felt relieved and ran away with Chang'an in a flash. Yang Guang's smile gradually faded and he murmured to himself, "Li Yuan, Li Chang'an. The source of the couplet is Baidu. If you are interested, you can search for it. There are also many interesting ones." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. On Brewing and Fermentation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 on Brewing and Fermentation. The words are divided into two parts. I won't mention how Chang'an explained to his mother for now. Among the 3 provinces and 6 ministries, the story of the 3-year-old prodigy Ji retreating from the Japanese envoy in the court just now has spread. Only in this Honglu temple, it is still quiet at this moment. Honglu Shaoqin Lu Ming called everyone to a place, threw a piece of paper on the table, picked up a tea bowl and took a sip, saying lightly, "Everyone, take a look, how is this pear?" Everyone gathered around and looked at it once, then again. 28 generals from Yuntai and 70.2 wise men from Chang'an. The duel is still neat and tidy. The content is concise, but the wording is not very innovative. Lu Ming smiled and said, "If I come up with a question, there should be 100 ancient names in the upper and lower couplets as answers. Do you want to see it again?" The hall fell silent for a moment. After a while, someone nodded faintly and murmured to themselves, "Amazing." Later, someone said, "If there were questions first and then this couplet, it would be very fitting." Which expert did Lord Lu write this couplet? Lu Ming calmly said 3 words. Li Chang'an. A moment of silence. Li Chang'an. That Li Chang'an. I know a few famous families with the surname Li, but I haven't heard of anyone with the word Chang'an. Isn't it someone's pen name? That's not true either. Everyone looked at each other and discussed, but in the end, they were still confused about the name Li Chang'an. It's just a 3-year-old child, of course you haven't heard of it. Lu Ming looked at the expressions of surprise on everyone's faces, feeling a sense of relief in his heart. A 3-year-old child. As soon as these words were spoken, not only the colleagues present, but also the soldiers standing guard outside the door glanced at each other, unable to conceal their inner shock. The house suddenly became noisy. Are you really only 3 years old? Which family's children and who do they learn from? I have heard of a prodigy named Gan Luo in ancient times. He was able to compose poetry at the age of 6 and went on a mission to the western regions at the age of 12. However, he was able to confront his opponents at the age of 3, which is truly unheard of. Lu Ming painted a vivid depiction of what happened in the court while drinking tea. The crowd present was filled with sighs and exclamations, but in the end, when the Japanese slave vomited blood and fainted to the ground, someone even applauded and cheered. After a while, some people were puzzled and said, according to Lord Lu, it only took a moment for the Japanese slave to answer the question, and this child had an answer. He was so neat and correct that I didn't feel like he did it himself. It was probably because I had heard others say it before and remembered it in my heart, and now I silently memorized it. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone fell silent. Memory and creation, which is difficult or easy, everyone knows in their hearts. If a 3-year-old child had heard of it beforehand, remembered it in their heart, and then took the opportunity to retell it, this assumption seems more likely. After all, this child's performance is like a story in a storybook, it's too unbelievable. At first, everyone was shocked by this heart-wrenching story and didn't think much about it. However, with the addition of elements such as 3-year-old children and on-site answering, the comparison with the original couplets brought a huge sense of unreality. The uncontrollable contrast brought confusion. He couldn't have done it himself, I think he probably heard it. So someone finally subconsciously said, I think this kind of speculation is very likely. Before he could finish speaking, a sudden roar came from the corner. Xiren! Shut up! The person being scolded was named Gao Ziren. He was startled and turned around to see an old man holding a brush, looking at him seriously with a calm and confident expression. The originally noisy room instantly quieted down. Seeking a monthly pass with 3 copies Kowtow, end of this chapter. Chapter 10. During Fermentation. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 10. During Fermentation. This old man's name is Su Wei, with the courtesy name Fearless. He was born in Wugong County, Jingzhou County, and was the son of the minister of the Western Wei dynasty. He was also the son-in-law of Osaka Prime Minister Yuan Hu. He was once appointed as the Crown Prince Xiaobao, with a straightforward and talented personality. Su Gong was already old and wanted to retire and return to his hometown, but Emperor Wen spared his talent and gave him a vacant position as a grand priest and a walking official in Honglu Temple. He also went to court this morning, and the details of the matter are clear to Yuan. But he knew that Lu Ming was a talkative and eye-catching person, so he let him boast. The hot-tempered old man couldn't help but hear someone slander Chongqing like this. Is that something you, a scholar, can say casually? This Gao Ziren had studied the Book of Rites with the old man for several months, and was considered half of his student. In his memory, he had never seen him lose his temper before. He was immediately frightened and bowed his head in hand. Su Lao. Su is always a master of Confucianism with a profound background. Although there are not many disciples in the court, his reputation is well known. When he said these words, he really made a resounding sound. Seeing everyone silent, Su Lao put down his brush and stood up, looking at Gao Ziren and asking, what would happen if a literary master or an elder of that dynasty answered this pair? As soon as these words were spoken, Gao Ziren understood the other person's meaning and his body trembled slightly. He stuttered and bowed, saying, disciple. Disciple, naturally. Naturally. There will be no doubt. Have you ever seen a person named Chongqing before? Do you know what books he has read, what words he has written, what language he has spoken, how he behaves, what his appearance and conduct are? Do you know all of these? Gao Ziren was sweating profusely when asked, disciple, I don't know. I knew I was wrong. Sui saw Ziren publicly admit his mistake, so he stopped delving deeper and said, since he knew his mistake, come and show this to everyone. He arched his hand and said to the crowd, colleagues, after solving the problem of being a Japanese slave, the other party refused to give up and competed with the young man a few more times. During this time, he recorded all the famous pairs and immortals that were born one by one. Let's take a look. Everyone looked up at the paper and saw Su Lao's carefully transcribed couplets. Before they could even admire the richness of his brushwork and the skill of his technique, they were attracted by the words on them. For a moment, there were those who were amazed and admired, those who felt inferior, those who silently pondered, and those who argued endlessly. The scene was very lively. Some praise it as midnight at 2:30, Mid-Autumn Festival in August. Dual neat and tidy, some praise that the warblers sing in the north and autumn only departs, while the Yen language suggests that spring is approaching in the south. The phrase, blessings come in pairs today, misfortunes never come alone yesterday, has a profound meaning and is thought-provoking. Some even read, in the two apes cutting Wood Mountain, this monkey can also see saws. How can a horse be born with hooves when it gets stuck in the mud at that moment? He couldn't help but laugh and burst out laughing, although the words used were a bit crude, describing those Japanese slaves was just right. This kid cursed so well, he cursed so hard. After tasting it, Su Wei took out the original paper note of 28 Generals of the Cloud platform and placed it on the table. Everyone, how about watching it again now? As soon as he finished speaking, Gao Ziren stood solemnly and said, Su Laogong's words were truly a wake-up call to his disciples. To put it bluntly, it seems that this person is well-organized, talented, and quick-witted in the confrontation. If we were to be placed in his position at the time, we would probably not be able to answer. The students just felt inferior and unconsciously envied, which is really not appropriate. Thanks to Su Laogong's teachings, they were able to awaken. Today, hearing this beautiful story, it is truly a testament to the spirit of a great Chinese nation and the prestige of a small Japanese slave country. From then on, our generation should even more strive for strength and be loyal to the country. After he finished speaking these words, Wei Lao stroked his beard and said, "Be honest and show respect. A gentleman. A scholar should be like this." Everyone nodded and said that the atmosphere inside the house had become more lively. Seeing everyone chatting happily, Lu Shaoqing walked over and carefully put away the 2 pieces of paper on the table just now. Someone saw it and smiled, saying, "Sir Shaoqing, why did you put these words and phrases away so quickly? I'm afraid you didn't like Su Lao's calligraphy and wanted to take advantage of it for nothing." Lu Ming put the things in his arms and put them away, snorted disdainfully, saying, "Although I am usually stingy, I am not such a person who does not distinguish between importance and importance. After hearing your discussion just now, I suddenly had an idea. Tomorrow morning, I will report to your Majesty, print these few couplets, bind them into a book, and distribute them to schools in various states, so that readers all over the world can know this anecdote. This will encourage their enthusiasm for learning." After hearing this, everyone praised him one after another, and Su Wei was also in the corner, raising a teacup to greet him. Whether Lu Ming wanted to stir up this east wind at this moment, whether it was for selfish or just reasons, it was a great good thing for scholars all over the world. When Lu Ming saw Su Lao, he smiled and said, "It would be great to include Su Gong's annotations in this booklet, so that this magnificent scene can also spread throughout the world." After hearing this, everyone was greatly surprised. If we were to talk about the proposal just now, everyone would be beating the drums, selling and shouting. This proposal is really a matter of mutual concern for them. Since ancient times, those who write books and speak can be remembered in the annals of history. Throughout history, why did those sages strive to write books and express themselves? On the one hand, it was to spread their ideas, and on the other hand, it was to be able to write their names on the long scroll of history. Countless emperors, generals, celebrities, and patriots are willing to sacrifice their lives to change the situation and stir up the world's affairs. Isn't it also for the sake of immortality? Nowadays, our names may also be written in books for future generations to read and admire. How inspiring news is this! This big pie smashed down, and everyone was confused. Su Lao said with a normal expression, "Lu Shaoqing, you're not being kind. If I ask you to write annotations, wouldn't you put me on the fire to grill me? I have limited knowledge, and how can I compare with our predecessors and judge others in books? Isn't this meant for future generations to point fingers at me and curse? I can't do this." Even if he completely rejected this statement, Lu Shaoqing knew his own weight. He may not be willing to listen to the emperor's petition alone. If Su Lao's face was added, the possibility would be much greater. At this moment, seeing the other party refuse directly, Lu Ming could only give a dry laugh and give up in frustration. While everyone was still sighing, Su Lao pondered deeply. Once this book was published, it not only spread a few couplets, but also anecdotes from the court and the views of readers. After being processed and produced by artists, the latter two are much more interesting than a few dry couplets. Scholars and literati may study couplets extensively, marveling at their exquisite structure and unparalleled literary talent. The people, on the other hand, are more concerned about strange stories, and once they pass them on by word of mouth, they don't know what they will become. The story of a 3 or 4-year-old child fighting against Japanese slaves in the court, ultimately causing him to vomit blood and retreat, and boosting the prestige of our country sounds so inspiring. It can accurately strike the pride and patriotic enthusiasm of the people in the hearts of the people. Su Lao dares to guarantee that if this matter spreads, there will soon be countless versions, including the supernatural version adapted by storytellers, the stirring version changed by literati, the gentle and sorrowful version sung by Gulen, and the version spoken by the common people as neighboring children. But no matter which version is good for Chang'an, there are too many stories about childhood is over, big may not be good. Su Lao was optimistic about Chang'an, so he didn't want him to lose himself and his spiritual energy in the midst of everyone's praise. This was also the reason why he declined the invitation from Lu Ming. And the focus of everyone's discussion, Chang'an, is still returning home and sleeping soundly at this moment, seeking a monthly pass with 3 copies Kaodao. End of this chapter.